hasn't started.
Hello and welcome to episode 291 of the Total Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. A huge thank you to our TSP Patreon community because we couldn't make the show each week without your support. And we've had a couple of new additions this week too. John Bevan has joined the Mick Shannon tier and Paul Stevens has joined our Bobby Stokes tier. So thank you both for your love and your support. It's much appreciated. Coming up this week on the podcast, a defeat on the road isn't unusual at the moment, but the manner of the loss at Bournemouth was quite alarming. There's plenty for our guests to discuss this week. And another away day looms with a trip to Arsenal on Saturday. We're going to preview that game with the help of Seb from the Pot Shot podcast. Now, my name is Martin Starke, and I'm joined on this episode by Steve Grant, who is the owner of Saints Web. Glen is writer of the blog League One -10, and Alfie House's senior Southampton reporter for the Daily Echo. We've had 48 hours to gather our thoughts, so let's get into it, shall we? For me, that was probably one of the worst performances from a Saints side I can remember in recent years. 3-0 down after 39 minutes, 3-1 the full-time score at Bournemouth. So the big questions, I guess, this week are, where did it all go wrong and who's to blame? Alfie, we've got to start with Russell Martin. There were some positive signs, I thought, versus Ipswich. So were you surprised to see as many changes as you did tactically?
Yeah, I was surprised. I felt, I wasn't there for Ipswich, obviously, but I watched it back, and particularly Man United in the first sort of half, they looked to me like they'd finally worked out their best 11, or at least the system in which they were going to play. They'd had players like, Tyler Dibbling and Lallana who were linking up, Sugawara on the right, who had his worst game at Bournemouth. He'd been used to linking up with Tyler Dibbling. They've made a good partnership. So I was surprised to see that. And, there was obviously 9 days between the games, and we were told there were no fitness concerns. So I think we were probably expecting them to, maybe go unchanged. What we ended up seeing was one of the most shambolic sort of 45 minutes of football I've ever seen in my life. If I'm being totally honest, it was that bad. Bournemouth should have been 4 or 5. They took their foot off the gas in the second half, and Southampton improved. They made a couple of changes at the break, and they did get better, but that wasn't a massive achievement. And you sort of talk about where does the blame lie? I think that first thing you have to look at the players. I think Flynn Downs, Taylor Harwood-Bellis, they've both come out and said that it was nowhere near good enough, and almost apologised, and that's fair enough. It wasn't, but I think a lot of us, when we saw the team sheet at 7 o'clock, I think we just sort of knew that it was bizarre. I couldn't understand why you'd move Tyler Dibbling away from a place 18 years old where he's been comfortable, and give him a much harder task. Someone like Cameron Archer, I know he's missed a couple of chances, but I felt he was doing well. To bring in Maxwell Cornet, who was an unused sub last week, and you've now deemed him the sort of the best choice to start. It's a little bit puzzling, and obviously the change in the system. I know they wanted to pack the midfield and try and keep the pitch wide because of the way Bournemouth play, but clearly it didn't work, and they changed it. So Russell Martin, for me, obviously he accepted the responsibility. He's come out and said that the players are. Well, he's really blasted the players, to be fair, actually, more so than he usually does. And I think he said that he was hurt by their performance, and that the fight, the spirit, the endeavour wasn't there, and all those things are 100% true. But I do think he has to bear the responsibility of that one. I just think when you've got something that's working, why would you change it? So I think it's a big step backwards after what had been a couple progressive games, and I think it's definitely worrying. And we've got to go to Arsenal on the weekend, so it's probably not going to get much better.
There were a few weird quotes that kind of came out. I think one was when he said afterwards, I will never, ever blame a group of players, as he was halfway through an impression of someone who was basically blaming all the players for their defeat. Glenn, I kind of felt like they were set up to fail from the start. Did you think the same watching that?
I don't know if I mean, that implies they kind of wanted to lose. I don't think that was the intention. I would just love to know the logic of the tactics that we employed. We've been doing it since the end of pre-season. We had a pre-season friendly where we didn't score, playing no one up front. We then had the first 3 league games of the season where we played with no one up front, didn't score until we changed it at the end against Brentford, got that consolation goal. We've had 2 games against Ipswich and Man United where there kind of been green shoots of recovery, playing with a centre forward, and then that was the most 9 days to come up with that. It was just garbage. When the team was announced, I think most people kind of thought, oh, Max Cornet's playing as the striker, but I literally got a sense of foreboding about 10 minutes before the kickoff, and I just thought, no, we're going to do something mental. We're not going to play with a bloody forward again, and it's just going to be garbage. I thought, when I thought about it again, I thought Diblin was going to be a false 9, and it turned out that he kind of was, but it was just bizarre. I mean, we took Bournemouth by surprise. It took them about 10 minutes to get used to, to work out what on earth we were doing. And then they just pushed the centre-halves forward. The centre-halves pushed forward on Diblin and Fernandez, who were then playing with their back to goal, 45 yards from goal, which, they're both new players to the Premier League. They're both very young. And it's just absolutely absurd. And what got me more than anything was that obviously Bournemouth scored and no changes. So our 2 most attacking creative players are completely neutered by Bournemouth's change. No one reacts. It's just so glaringly obvious. If you put a centre forward on, then obviously the centre backs have got to drop back, and then the 2 lads have got more room and they're facing the right way. I was just so angry at half time. And of course the players compounded it by giving up. At 1-0, they gave up for 20 minutes and 10 minutes, whatever it was. And the game was completely dead. I mean, you look at the second goal, the same mistakes that we've made in previous games. Everybody dropping back to the goal line, basically, and no one picking up the guy on the edge. And that's how the second goal comes about. Also, you've got everybody pushes out except for one. Flynn Downs didn't bother. That's what you learn when you're about 10. When you're a footballer, you push out when the cross comes in anyway. Third goal, pathetic, half-assed defending. Taylor Harwood-Bellis was kind of, near the third goal, and the ball went through his legs in the end. But that's Bednarek's channel. Where was he? There were just players abdicating responsibility all over the place. And how we got to half-time, just the 3-0 down, was more by luck and judgment, I'd say. Second half irrelevant because Bournemouth won the game, and they just, they're professional players at the end of the day, and they just do what they have to do to get over the line and get the 3 points. I mean, we got a consolation goal with 40 minutes to go and then didn't have another shot. But what got me in the second half was there was one particular incident that got me. 86 minutes and we get a throw in, and it's prime sort of long throw territory. It's about 10 yards from their goal line. So you can either throw it into the box if you've got someone who can do that, or you can basically play a 1-2 and then cross it. But basically you put the ball in the box. What did we do? We threw it backwards, 1 pass back to the halfway line, 1 pass back to Ramsdale. 86 minutes, 2 goals behind. That's just a team that can't think on their feet. They don't read the match situation. It was pathetic. And we're going to get into this style of play argument, I'm sure, because a lot of people have obviously had that in for Russell Martin ever since he arrived, even last season. I think it's basically okay whilst the game's 0-0 to try and control the game and and sort of suffocate the opposition and all that sort of stuff. Once you go a goal, let alone 2 goals behind, we're just not putting enough pressure on their back four. And it was such an easy game for the likes of Senesi and Zabani in defence. Ross Stewart, I thought, was okay when he came on, but I just thought that the first half was so bad, and you can't come up with weird tactical stuff like this playing without a centre forward. You're never going to win a game like that. You can't come up with weird stuff like that and not expect people to turn on you. If you get hammered by Bournemouth, who at the end of the day, I think they're a fairly decent side. I think they're lower than they should be in the league, or they were before Monday anyway. But they were in the bottom 6. they're one of the teams we're looking to be taking points off of, and we just completely got outplayed. And that's a big minus against everybody. But in particular, it's against the manager. We didn't have a hope in hell from the moment Bournemouth realised what we were doing and pushed everybody up. I'll stop now.
Steve, you've been away, so it feels like you dodged a bit of a bullet there, because I guess you'd have been at the game otherwise, wouldn't you? The forward three for you, did it smell a bit of desperation? Because it did to me. It just felt like another roll of the dice, and let's just try and find another 3 players and see if we can get a goal.
But yeah, I mean, it just didn't make any sense. Like we've come so close to winning last week, and frankly, that game last week against Ipswich, second half, we should have won that comfortably. Should have been 2 or 3. And then you go into Bournemouth, suddenly everyone's absolutely buzzing with confidence, and you probably name the same 11. And actually, I think the kind of that sort of hammer blow in the 95th minute when that shot deflects into the top corner and takes that win away from us, I think that has completely just befuddled Russell Martin for basically the week afterwards. Because I mean, I don't think you could even say that the system that we tried to play Monday night was anything that we'd even tried practicing in pre-season. We've not tried playing with 3 wingers on the pitch, or with one of them playing as a nominal false 9, or even 2 players as kind of false 10s, really. Such was the position that Dibbling and Fernandez were seemingly being asked to play. And yeah, I just why change it for the sake of it? I mean, I get that Martin will obviously say, I didn't change it for the sake of it. We had specific things that we wanted to either target Bournemouth with or kind of prevent things that they do really well. But at some point, you've got to look at your own team and say, well, okay, well, actually, what are our strengths? Against Man United, I would say for the first 40 minutes or so, the midfield was excellent. Against Ipswich, for most of the game, the midfield was brilliant. So why would you then rip that up? You've got a kind of blueprint that you can use. And we've seen, I mean, obviously United, they are what they are. They are a bit ropey, but they have terrific individual players. And our midfield competed against their excellent players for a good portion of that game. And I think if we'd still been in the game, then that would have been a fascinating battle. But against Ipswich, that midfield was dominant for the most part. And why just? I mean, unless Lallana has got some sort of injury that means that he can only play. I mean, what did he end up playing in the end? 20 minutes.
Don't dare ask about it, though, Steve.
I was going to say we should ask Alfie about
that. But it was 9 days. It was 9 days. It was 9 days since the last game, and he only played 55 minutes in that.
It was 9 days, and there was no mention of any fitness concerns before the match. So that was why I was puzzled by it.
No,
I think it's a perfectly valid question, but
yeah, and it absolutely was, and the way he kind of tried to turn it around and get you to basically answer the question for him. It's like, well, that's not my job, my friend. And it kind of shows that I think he's listening to outside noise a bit too much, and I think he's now got to that stage where he's trying to be a little bit clever. Whereas, I mean, something that somebody pointed out, I can't remember who it was. Somebody pointed out this morning that I saw on Twitter that basically, when like one of Russell Martin's key things has always been that everybody knows their job, everybody has their role, and they know exactly what they're doing in that role. And for the most part, for last season, yeah, fine. The vast majority of the players were in a particular position, and you could see the logic behind it. And all those players were well drilled on what they had to do in that role. Didn't always work, but for the most part, it worked enough because it got promoted. And this season, again, for the most part, in most games, we've offered a threat. There's been occasions where, like, we concede a goal and kind of heads go down and we fall apart for a little bit. but for the most part, we've been competitive, and yet he's decided to bring something like a completely different way of playing in at like 9 days' notice. Where I mean, you'll have had a week's worth of training at the absolute most. Playing in that system, and yeah, I mean, sure, Tyler Dibbling might be brilliant as a false number 9 against our centre backs, but that says more about them than it does about our attack, about those attackers. It's frustrating that something that, and I mean, I'm always kind of loath to kind of pile it on the manager for making something that kind of objectively just looks really odd, because I mean, you look at even the best managers, they will do something every so often with their team lineup and the system that just makes absolutely no logical sense. I mean, Pep Guardiola, I'm absolutely not comparing Pep Guardiola to Russell Martin here, by the way, but Pep Guardiola, massively famous for doing really weird things in big games, because it seems as if he kind of overthinks it and he tries to be too clever, and he's trying to nullify the opposition. He gets into this mindset of trying to nullify the opposition rather than accentuating the ridiculous players that he's got at his disposal. And it feels as if we're kind of just at a much lower level of that with this game. There was no need to go with that system. If everybody is fit and available, if Adam Lallana is okay to play an hour, he starts for me. The way he's performed when he's been able to get on the pitch, he's been one of our best players. Tyler Dibbling playing off the right, one of our best players. It doesn't need to be rocket science. Yeah, sure, we're not individually, we're not as good as most of the teams in this league. It may turn out we're not as good as any of them over a 38-game season, as it did 2 seasons ago. But you've got to give yourself the best chance possible, and I just don't think we did that Monday night with the changes we made. It was just shooting ourselves in the foot, really.
Steve, just on that, I made this point in an article yesterday morning. It was a pretty quick reaction to the game, and obviously, I suppose emotions are still high. But I made the point that you've sort of alluded to there. Is a couple of weeks ago in a press conference, Russell Martin said to me, because I said to him that your teams, they've always gotten better over the course of the season. In your 5 years as a manager, not once has your team got worse over the course of a season. And he said, well, that's exactly because, what you've just said there, we play players consistently. They stay in their positions. They know where their teammates are. It's about feelings, it's about trust, it's about love for each other. They know where their mate's going to be when they turn with the ball. And I just can't understand how, like you've just said, 9 days after a game where you've won a game, you've coached a win effectively, you've just lost it in the last minute because of a freak moment. Your players are building understanding, and you decide now's the time to change, to move at least 3 or 4 of them around, take 2 of them out. I just think that's why it's such a puzzling decision, and that's why Russell Martin's been blamed for this one, probably more than any other result, because you can always look at the players. But for this one, it was just a totally unnecessary change, and I just think he's overcomplicating what could be something relatively simple when they're already playing a style which is scary for the players, because they know they're not as good as Bournemouth. Bournemouth are the favourites in that game for a reason. They're already, they're facing Arsenal this weekend. They know they're going to be under a lot of pressure taking the ball at the back, and I just wonder if do they need that added confusion, that added fear that they've already got in their heads?
No, they don't. And if you go back to the start of last season, do you remember the famous tactical explainer evening that we went to? And that was all about round pegs in round holes. Players, first choices in these positions, 4-3-3 formation, basically, and backups who come in and exactly know the job. I mean, Steve's point was spot on earlier on. We didn't always get it right. We, like he tried Will Smallbone as a number 6, for example, which didn't really work. Joe Rothwell was a deep line midfield player. That didn't work either. So there was the odd misstep. And obviously we changed the formation towards the end of the seasons for a specific purpose. But I just think you can be clever and get away with it in the Championship. Manchester City can get away with being clever because they've got brilliant players at whatever level, whatever competition they're playing in. They're going to have better players than the opposition. Us last year, we had better players than the opposition a vast majority of the time. So you could afford the odd little bit of madness and you'd get away with it, like we did in the game where Rothwell scored the 2 goals, for example. Can't believe I'm talking about Joe Rothwell. Anyway. But this year, our players are not as good as the players on the opposition. So you need the structure. and you need to know what you're doing more than ever. If our players aren't good enough, that's one thing, but the manager has got to make them bigger than the sum of their parts. And the way you do that is with organisation. It's not with trying random stuff or seemingly random stuff. I mean, you know, we did the pre-season with these split strikers, Armstrong and Brereton Diaz. It didn't work. We then bin that off and have gone back to the 4-3-3 formation, which and got results at it. And then yesterday we did that. Well, not got results, but you know, looked better. And then that on Monday, which was just absurd. But yeah, there you go. It just brings everybody down, massive step backwards, and you've got to build it up again from scratch.
Even the bench raised a few eyebrows, didn't it, Alfie? Did we ever get to the bottom of whether 5 strikers on the bench was a record or not?
No, I don't know if it's a record or not. I did ask Russell Martin about it, and his answer was, look, we haven't won enough games, we haven't scored enough goals, and we wanted an aggressive bench in order to do that. So he named 5 strikers on the bench. Obviously, the counter out of that, that's it didn't come to my head at the time. But yeah, if you want to be more aggressive, you want to score more goals, and you want to name 5 strikers on the bench, maybe starting one of them would have been a start. But that was his answer.
Then claimed that it was pretty self-explanatory. That was the thing that got me.
It's one of those. I get it, right, because I understand that he's just lost a huge game. He's obviously there's a lot of pressure on him. I do understand that it's a tough job. There's a lot of pressure on them. So it's not for me to start making digs or to make it a problem or to try and put myself into the story. But he has to accept that there's going to be questions about things sometimes, and he hasn't been very good at that so far here at Southampton in terms of just answering questions and answering challenges. So it's something that he needs to think about. But yeah, it's a puzzling one when you bring in someone like Paul Onuachu, who we all knew that he was not getting on the pitch at any point, no matter what the scenario of the game was. I'd have bet my house on him never coming on. Do you know what I mean? So it just seemed a little bit puzzling, but that wasn't necessarily the reason they lost the game.
And if one of the centre-backs had got injured, then I don't know what the plan was. Is that, Steve, about keeping that bloated squad happy? Because it's not his fault that we've got people like Tall Paul still kicking around. And it just felt like, I can't, I'm just trying to scratch my head. Why do you put him on the bench? You pick 2 strikers, your best of your bad bunch, and you put those on the bench, surely?
Yeah, I would have thought so. But yeah, I mean, I'm keeping the bloated squad happy. I'm not sure that flies really. Because ultimately, that's the starting 11 and the 9 subs has got to be some form of meritocracy. Okay, sure, you need certain cover in certain positions. So if, obviously, current situation, Jack Stevens is suspended, so you need another centre half in there. And yet, okay, where is the centre half option? Because he's obviously decided he doesn't. Even with no other available centre half, he's decided, well, I'm not going to pick Ronnie Edwards. I'm not going to pick Nathan Wood. I'm not going to pick Amo-Ameyaw. So he's staking quite a gamble. Given that you can name 9 substitutes, it's almost an entire new team, and yet he's decided, no, we're not going to bother with any defensive backup just in case somebody goes and launches themselves at an opposition winger's knee again.
Well, it would have been Charlie Taylor, wouldn't it, with Walker Peters coming on?
Yeah, maybe, but it's Taylor's not a centre half by trade. He can fill in if he can fill in for a bit, which I suppose is what Russell Martin's looking at.
It would have been somebody else playing out of position again.
We've got enough centre backs who are actual centre backs who play there as their number 1 position, and I find it very difficult to believe that Bella Kotchap, Edwards, or Wood aren't better than Charlie Taylor as a starting set as an option at centre half. Taylor's not going to play centre half as a starter, is he? Let's be brutally honest. But it's just bizarre. There's just those little moments, isn't it, where you look at certain things in certain games, you just think, what? It's just baffling.
Are we back to blaming the poor recruitment, do you think, Glenn? Because we talked about the bench a little bit there. Is this kind of, we come back to the person that decided to pay 7 million quid for Ben Brereton Diaz. I don't know if you saw the story this week. He set the new record for playing 20 Premier League games without a win, and I assume that might be 21 at the weekend. We paid 15 million quid for Cameron Archer. We paid £8 million for Ross Stewart. Are we back to blaming recruitment again?
Well, you could look at the 5 strikers on the bench thing another way, and you could. I mean, when I saw it, my first thought was he thinks all of them are rubbish. So to not pick any of them, Adam Armstrong hasn't played a minute since he's come out of the team. He's not come on as a sub. Oh, yeah, no, he did. I'll tell you. Forget that. He did come on in the Ipswich game, didn't he, for 5 minutes at the end. So Adam Armstrong doesn't seem to be anywhere near getting in. Cameron Archer has obviously missed a couple of chances. He seems to have been made the whipping boy for us not beating Ipswich.
Which is stupid because he's the only one that got in the position to miss him in the first place.
Right.
Brereton Diaz has been awful since he signed. I mean, there's no point in saying anything more about that. He's just been terrible. He makes you wonder about the strength of Chilean football if he gets a go. And you got Ross Stewart, who's obviously coming back off a big injury. But as I said earlier, I think he did okay, and it sounds like he's now at the front of the queue. Bear in mind, he's the only one that Russell Martin is talking about in it with any sort of positive overtone about it. So, yeah, I mean, you can look at it and you can say the bottom line is our squad isn't good enough. Our squad at the top end of the pitch is not good enough to score enough goals. We've obviously got issues at the back as well. You can see that by we've got a really good goalkeeper and we're letting in 3 goals a game.
Yeah.
Whenever there's any sort of pressure against us. So you could say that, but it comes back to the previous point. I mean, that's what he's got, and he's got to do the best he can with that. That can't be changed until January. And yes, we can blame poor recruitment. It would have been maybe nice to get Bella Kochap and Paul out the door if they're not required, and get another 1, maybe 2 players in. Would have been nice to do that, but we can't do that. Make the most of what you've got. Make us bigger than the sum of our parts. Why isn't Kyle Walker-Peters playing? It's just mad. It's
not
just
that, not that like he's been brilliant this season, or that even that was necessarily the problem against Bournemouth. But you just think, like, how is Kyle Walker-Peters going as an unused sub in 2 games in a row?
He's better than Sugawara. He's better than Taylor. He's our best player, best fullback in either position. So for him not to be playing is mad. I know Sugawara, he's played okay so far. He was shocking against Bournemouth, and I think there are mitigating factors for that.
Yeah, he wasn't the only one, was he?
But Walker-Peters is by far our most accomplished player, really, and he could even play further forward. I do not understand why. Unless there's something that's gone on that's not been reported about.
You kind of think there has to be, doesn't there? Otherwise,
absolutely,
there's no other way of looking at it. There was the story about the contract. Then he's not in the team, and he's an unused sub at Bournemouth. There's got to be.
Yeah. But as ever with Russell Martin, and this isn't necessarily a problem because he manages the way that he thinks best of the squad. We've asked him that question twice to his face, and he just says there's no problem with contracts. Charlie Taylor gives us more balance, and we're not in the business of then accusing him of being a liar and constantly asking the same question. You have to take it at face value a little bit, until you hear something from somebody else. So yeah, it's a strange one. It's a strange one.
Well, the pressure's on, Steve. So what happens next? I mean, we're not really expecting to get anything out of the Arsenal game, are we? But I mean, Alfie makes a good point. The international break comes at a really bad time. I thought that was a really good point tonight and a good story today. There's going to be a lot of speculation over the next few weeks, and we've got some big games coming up.
I mean, you look at the run. I mean, let's be honest. We're probably writing off Saturday, aren't we? But you look at the games beyond the international break, and there's probably 3 out of 4 that are theoretically winnable. I mean, City away, obviously, bin that one off. And then you've got, Leicester at home, Everton at home, and Wolves away. Those are all teams that are in and around us. I mean, much like Ipswich, it's not necessarily a case of having to win them, although having now not won that game against Ipswich last week, all of a sudden the pressure is now ratcheted up on the others because the other teams have been picking up the occasional point. Most of them are draws. Leicester and Ipswich are still without a win, but Everton managed to beat Palace at the weekend. So, yeah, there's there's a gap opening up on kind of us and Wolves now. I mean, it's pretty mad that Wolves are somehow still below us. It just shows how god awful they've been to start the season, and that's not a new thing either. They've been dreadful since. Like I think I saw a stat that Burnley have got more Premier League points than them since the end of February.
Brilliant.
So that shows what's going on at Molineux. But yeah, I think the international break is a good time and a bad time for Russell Martin. It's a good time because he can possibly kind of regroup everybody and get things focused. Although, of course, we're going to lose a load of players to the international break anyway, so a lot of the key ones won't be around. And it's obviously a bad one because international breaks are famously excellent times for teams that are looking to change their manager, because you then give the new guy a week and a half sort of run up to their first game to see if they can affect sort of any immediate change from the squad. So yeah, I mean it's one of those situations. I mean, how much of in a gambling mood are Sports Republic feeling? Are they feeling like they want to roll the dice and see what happens, or do they give it at least until the next international break, where we'll have then gone through those winnable games against the sides around us? But obviously the risk then is if it all still goes wrong, then we're absolutely cut adrift, and you kind of think, well, who's actually going to take the job? Because I mean, Graham Potter was conveniently in the Monday Night Football studio for Sky, wasn't he? Which I mean, that didn't seem to be by accident. He's presumably stopped being paid by Chelsea now after getting sacked a while back. But
then he didn't want the Leicester job in the summer, did he? Is that right? That was one of the rumours at the time, wasn't it?
Well, I don't know really. I mean, Leicester was always a bit of a funny one because there was always that sort of spectre of likely points deductions, which Mr. Loophole has somehow managed to wheedle them out of it. So I wonder whether nobody of sort of real repute being interested in that job was just because you were potentially looking at a 10-point deficit, and at that point you just say, well, what's the point?
But David Moyes was the other name that's mentioned today, and this is the thing, isn't it?
You then, I mean, what does the club have a strategy for how we play on the pitch? If they do, and I mean, from what we've seen in the last 15-16 months, they have a very well-defined strategy. Do they tear that up just because they want to kind of just gamble and go with the shock treatment and go with something completely different? But I mean, you look at that squad can't play Moyes' football.
No, it's
a defensive solidity and quick on the counter-attack system, which worked brilliantly for West Ham for a fair period of time. But we don't have the players for that. We're not good defensively, and we're not that good. We're not that fast on transition. So chucking
it all in the bin was what we did 2 years ago with Nathan Jones.
And obviously that worked swimmingly. And ultimately that January transfer window is why we've had to basically resort to, well, effectively settling for the attacking options that we've ended up buying this summer. If we'd been able to, if we'd not made all of those nonsense signings in that January, as they turned out, then we'd have had so much more freedom on the profit and sustainability rules. Then maybe we're not paying £7 million for Brereton Diaz and 15 for Cameron Archer. Maybe we're able to go 25 for someone who's got a little bit more proven caliber in the Premier League. And all of a sudden, your starting lineup looks very different when you've got a centre forward who is going to get 10 to 15 goals. But we're not in that position, and that ultimately comes down to the god awful decisions that were made 2 seasons ago. We're still paying for it, and we will continue to pay for it for a while.
We're back to blaming the recruitment again, aren't we, Glenn? I just want to get your thoughts on it before we move on. There's a few things there, obviously, to discuss. I mean, you would think a new manager means abandoning the style of play, and the club probably won't want to do that. You look at who they might bring in. Do we trust them to bring somebody in? Because it's not going to be Graham Potter. And as Steve said, there is that run of games that are winnable. Is it a case of waiting to see where we are kind of November and that international break?
I don't think they'll pull the trigger now. I really don't. I am, okay, accepting that Arsenal is probably a write-off. But if we've got 2 home games coming up against Leicester and Everton, if we don't win either of those, I can just see what's left of the crowd that supports severely questioning that. And that's when, if we haven't won either of those 2 games, I can see a change being made at that point. But they won't want to make a change. They won't want to make a change at all, because last Premier League season, you don't have to think back too far. As I said just now, we appointed Nathan Jones and went from one style completely to another, and then we went to no style at all with Ruben Selles. So we made a complete pig's ear of it last time. So they will want it to work. To be honest, I want it to work, but I can't deal with us playing with no bloody striker, because we're not Spain 2012. We're not Manchester City before they signed Haaland. It's just a ridiculous thing to expect a team of our level to do that. So if he does that again, having seen it spectacularly not work every time he's tried it, I'm done, I'm afraid, because that just shows that you're never going to learn from what was a catastrophic decision. If they do go for a new manager at some point, it's got to be someone along the lines of, playing the same sort of football along the same lines as Russell Martin does, but obviously, a little bit more pragmatic, a little bit more geared towards winning games, making us harder to beat, making it more difficult for teams to score goals against us. For God's sake. I mean, that's the problem. It's so easy to score goals against us. We need to have a bit more urgency going forward. Now, there are managers out there who could do that. And people say Graham Potter's not going to take the job. Why not? Why not? He was sat in the studio like a vulture on Monday, but maybe he can see enough to think, these guys have all got the maximum faith in their own ability. So yes, he won't want to go on to a hiding to nothing, but maybe he sees something. Maybe they could promise him a load of investment in the January transfer window. Who knows? I don't see. I mean, I just flicked into the comments. Someone put Jurgen Klopp. Now that's ridiculous, but I don't think Graham Potter is necessarily ridiculous. And to me, with his past record and what he achieved at Brighton, to me that would be a sensible appointment come the day. But I don't think we're
not there yet.
I don't think we're there yet. But the next 2 home games going skywards, I think we will be.
On a lighter note, are we going to welcome Evan Nilsson to the Get Your First Goal Against Saints Club, the latest member of a long and steeple tradition now? If anybody wants to sort of tweet me who their prediction is of who's going to be next to get their first goal for the club against Saints.
Well, I'd like to thank him, to be honest.
David Raya.
Yeah, Glenn, he showed us that you need number 9. He showed us that you need, number 1, great finish. Number 2, held the ball up brilliantly and started a counter attack which they score from. It's
and showed you need £40 million to be able to do it.
Yeah, maybe that's right. Yeah.
But that goal was so avoidable, wasn't it? Jesus Christ! Just stand on the free kick.
Yeah, we haven't even spoken about that really. I mean, Russell Martin actually said, and this is one of those ones where if it's true, you have to lambast the players, because he said that they spent the week building up, focusing on the fact that they take quick set plays and how to stop them. So to switch off like that is not on the manager's fault. It's completely unforgivable for the players. And then I saw Antoine Semenyo after the match on Sky saying that, yeah, we knew we could get them like that. We knew we could do quick set plays, and they'd switch off, taking the piss on Sky. You had Tommy Alfie, the Cherries assistant manager, in the press conference after saying, when we saw that 11, we knew it was time to get at them, and we were going to have fun. And you just think, oh my God, they're taking the piss out of you. It's Bournemouth.
Did you see the manager's quote as well?
Where he said, I prefer to have chances than possession of the ball.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's just like-
this is Bournemouth talking about, like, massive credit to Bournemouth for where they are and whatnot. But they've got 11,000 seater stadium. They should have been the little brother, and they're taking the piss. So it's a worrying sign.
And we haven't even got onto the cancelled train announcement either, but that'll have to
That's
wait for another
brilliant.
day. We will preview the Arsenal game very, very soon. I just want to say we've had lots of new faces join us over the last 12 months, and we're getting more messages than ever from people who are new to the podcast. So a huge welcome to anybody who might be watching or listening or has just discovered us recently. Just a quick reminder of a couple of things we've got going on in the coming weeks. Going to be hosting our first fans forum during the international break. We're going to live stream it. We're going to put it on the socials and the YouTube channel. It might be a chance for you to get something off your chest. Grab the microphone, share how you feel about the team. You've listened to our thoughts tonight. Have your say on the manager, your outlook for the season, much more as well. Keep an eye on the socials. It's at Total Saints Pod for more information on that. We've also got a TSP Pilsner in the works. Yep, our own beer. Thanks to our partnership with Steamtown Brewery. We're getting our own can of lager. We shared the can label, which looks really cool with the Patreon members earlier on today. Really looking forward to seeing this. It's going to be ready very soon. We've got a canning date for it, which I think is the 10th of October. Again, socials, best place to find out more and find out how you can get hold of some of that. So lots of things going on at the moment. Keep an eye on the socials for all of those. I suppose we better talk about the Arsenal game, haven't we? Before the international break, we can expect probably one more humiliation. It's Arsenal away this weekend. To remind us how big that task is, I'm pleased to say that we're joined by Seb, who's from a podcast called The Pot Shot, to help us preview the game. Seb, sorry to keep you waiting. We had a lot to get off our chest at the moment.
No worries.
I'm sure you can imagine. How are you getting on this season? I mean, Saka was saying today he believes that Arsenal are finally going to beat Manchester City to the title. Is he right?
It does feel like it. I mean, if you consider we're 5 or 6 games into the new season, we've played Villa away, Tottenham away, Manchester City away, Brighton away, with the not so mitigating circumstances of losing Martin Odegaard last international break and having a very let's call it interesting sending off of Declan Rice just before the Tottenham game. Coming out of that run of fixtures with 7 points against Tottenham, Villa, and City away is a mighty task, considering we're sort of still getting up to grips with finding a rhythm and finding sort of a momentum coming into the season.
The injury you mentioned there to Odegaard, has that kind of forced him to come up with some different combinations and of other players kind of stepped in? I haven't seen too much of Arsenal, but I know that's the kind of stuff that you look at on your podcast.
Yeah, so there are, I think we can sort of divide these up into two categories of games. Like immediately after the international break, we had Spurs and City away, which, are different circumstances, considering if you're losing your most ball dominant player, a player that sort of is responsible for the tempo at which your team plays, coming up against teams that are as good as these two, you're going to see possession a bit. So we did adjust, and we used the same shape in all 4 games, but in a slightly different way. So against Tottenham and against Spurs, Tottenham and Manchester City, we set up in a 4-4-2, sat deeper, and used our front two, which in these games were Leandro Trossard and Kai Havertz, as exit players to hold the ball up, bring the wide players in, and look more so at controlling the game out of possession rather than doing as much in possession. Against Leicester, the story obviously is a bit different. For one, Leicester and the recent Champions League game against PSG are the first games we saw Riccardo Calafiori really coming into the team, and his individual quality really gives the team a new dynamic, considering he is, I called him on a recent podcast, a give and go player. He's someone who isn't content with sitting in a space and dictating from there. He wants to continue providing his quality in individual actions even after he plays a pass. So he plays a pass, he goes forward, he gets into momentum, and he creates dynamism through his off-ball running and through his combinations with different teammates. So that has changed the dynamic even more so. We saw a lot more ball dominance from the sort of double false nines in this case, in Havertz and Leandro Trossard, who sort of connect with the wide players on either side, which allowed Declan Rice to drop deeper and contribute to more dictation of play and switching play and sort of being a bit of a quarterback to the team, which in my opinion gives him a lot more access to actually contributing to the game, whereas in the first few games of the season, where we were sort of more statically in a 4-3-3, he was one of the 8s, basically playing as a high interior in the left half space, receiving with his back to goal, receiving in very tight, congested areas, and you're not really going to get the same amount of attacking quality out of him if you have him receiving in those spaces than you are if you have him behind the ball, actually contributing to play, able to drive with the ball and create meaningful sort of contributions with his passing and his carrying.
Give us a little shred of hope, Seb, for the weekend. Is there any way that we can get anything out of this? Is there anybody that's going to be missing? Is he going to change the team too much? Is he going to have one eye on the Champions League? Is there any hope for us at all?
So I do think we will see some rotation in the game. I expect guys like, specifically, I think Ethan O'Neary is likely to start, in my opinion. He came on against Leicester, he started the game against Bolton, and he's impressed in every appearance he's been on so far. He is about as rubber stamped as a youth player is going to get at this level. He already looks like an accomplished senior player. He's an 8 that can replicate a lot of the stuff Ødegaard does when he plays on that side. He's a great driver of the ball. He's very creative. He can dribble through multiple players, get shots off, etc. So he's someone who can actually affect play well and seems comfortable at that level. So I expect him to start. I hear myself talking about it, and that doesn't really sound like something positive for Southampton.
No, I think we're hoping the game might get called off, to be honest.
Yeah, I do struggle seeing the positives here because Arsenal feel like the exact things that Southampton actually struggle with.
100%.
In terms of
pieces,
us,
especially.
We're with
yeah,
you on
that's
that.
the big point. Martin teams have been historically iffy on set pieces, and for as much as I like him, Aaron Ramsdale isn't a good keeper on set pieces and has been a big weakness in defending set pieces even at Arsenal over his time. So combining one of our contributors, Jay, calls him one of the worst set piece goalkeepers in the league, with a team that historically hasn't been great on set pieces.
That's interesting.
Is a combination that's quite bad. I think we have. I think the goals United scored, the first two, which came off set pieces.
I think our defenders were so bad at set pieces as well. Maybe it just gets masked. I think the midfielders,
Ramsdale is Ramsdale is very hesitant to get off his line, and very hesitant to really. He's a reactive goalkeeper rather than a proactive one, and for the few games he came into last season when Raya wasn't allowed to be played against Brentford, you can see that contrast quite starkly between a keeper that is very, very proactive, wants to get to balls, wants to pluck things out of his area, and really control his 18-yard box, versus a keeper that is more reactive, more content to stay on his line and react to situations. And that is a problem when you're defending set pieces and you have a team that isn't particularly good at defending set pieces. The other big thing is out of possession. Like, Arsenal is one of the best coordinated presses in the league, maybe even in Europe at this point, and has been historically. And I remember games against Tottenham last season where there was a lot of emphasis on pressing, build up high, creating high turnovers and getting shots off that way. And I can already see a few faces getting a bit angry there. It gives me I do like Saints, and I like Russell Martin especially. So I watched him a fair bit last year, and I have this feeling that we could see something akin to the Leicester home game at the start of last season. In terms of
what I'm so glad I got you on, Seb.
You got too far now.
Build up.
Alfie, it looks like Joe Aribo might be coming in.
Maybe twice. It's all good.
Ross Stewart up front as well. Those were the names that Russell Martin was talking positively about.
Yeah.
So we think Aribo might come in. Could be a first start for Stewart.
Yeah, so Russell Martin's obviously he's flip-flopped a little bit in the sense that after 3 games, he said that the players, that he started the season, he's been too loyal to, and he obviously took them out of the team. And then, after this on Monday night, he's kind of turned around and said, actually, I've been too loyal to the players that I've started this time. And, it's Ross Stewart, it's Joe Aribo who've come on and been outstanding. And it suggests that they're going to come on and start. He said that they should have started, and obviously Lallana will as well. So I expect another couple of changes, but I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. Like he's made good changes to his team over the course of the last 12 months, and he's made, like Glenn alluded to there, system changes that have really worked. But I don't think it's ideal that 7 games into a season, he's still sort of thinking that he's realising new things about who should be starting, who should be playing. And Seb's absolutely correct about what Arsenal are strong at. And I wrote a little bit today about just how good they are and why it's the nightmare fixture at this point, because Southampton conceded 6 goals from set pieces, the most of any team in the league. It's 4 from corners, and they're an absolute joke from corners. Gabriel's, he's in fantasy teams going to get a hat trick, I hope. No, I don't hope, but certainly for my FPL fantasy, I did. So I just think it's the perfect nightmare for Saints this weekend, and hopefully they can prove me totally wrong and show that football is just 11 men kicking a ball around, and anything can happen.
I guess, Glenn, for us, it's going to be about just seeing a sensible team selection, a bit of effort from the players that are on the pitch, and maybe a half-decent tactical approach. It seems crazy that those are the things we're just wanting and willing at the moment, but we just want to see them turn up and give it a go.
Yeah, I do. I want to get out of the game without being embarrassed. For Aaron Ramsdale's sake, as much as anything. We've talked about us letting in 3 goals a game. I think if we got away with 2 or 3, I think we'd be quite happy with that. Such is the low bar that we're setting at the moment. But I think all you can do when you play teams like Arsenal, Manchester City, is look at the areas of every area of their team is obviously stronger than every area of ours. But you've got to look at what is not quite as good. And I've looked at Arsenal over the last few games, and obviously since Odegaard out, there has been a bit of a lack of the creativity. The likes of Trossard, Martinelli, yes, they're very, very good players, obviously, but we're talking about Arsenal standards here. We're not talking about Southampton standards. They're not quite as good as the players that have come out of the team. So. And Havertz is a player that divides opinion, but he seems to have stepped up a notch. He seems to have stepped up a notch this season, and he's doing really well. So I think there is the potential there for us to as long as we concentrate defensively for the whole game, we could frustrate Arsenal a little bit. With Odegaard not being there, but going the other way. I'd be absolutely amazed if we get anywhere near their goal, to be honest. We've got to play with the centre forward, but you look at the Arsenal back four, it's so well drilled. The 2 centre halves are world class. I'd forgotten about it. I saw Calafiori play when he scored that goal against City, and I sort of remembered what a good player he looked when he played for Italy in the summer. Ben White, I can't stand, but he's a good player. They've got so much strength all over the pitch. We've just got to look for those little crumbs, and I just hope that we can keep it, relatively solid and try and frustrate Arsenal for as long as we can. And the most important thing for us is that if we do go a goal down, we've just got to keep. We just got to get back on the horse and keep doing it. We can't afford to give up, because you give up for 20 minutes against Bournemouth and you let in 3 goals. If you give up for 20 minutes against Arsenal, it just could be absolutely horrendous. So, Saints have just got to go there and do their best, put in a load of effort, put in a good performance, try and cause Arsenal some problems. I'm not having the no striker thing, even against Arsenal. We've got to at least have someone up there to give the centre half something to think about. Even if it's Paul Onuachu for a laugh. It would be amusing, wouldn't it? But they won't have seen anything like that before. But
that would be some redemption arc. I guess, Steve, last time in the Premier League, it was 2 draws. We had the 1-1 draw at home, and then there was the Ruben Sellers masterclass. It was 3-3 at the Emirates. So there is that.
I do remember that one.
Let's be brutally honest. That should have been 4 points, not 2. We made a right horlicks of that in the last, in injury time, didn't we?
Yeah.
You've always got to have hope, because kind of otherwise, what's the point? But of course, it's going to be in thin supply after what we've seen on Monday. And as you previously said, our defending from set pieces is I mean, from a numeric perspective, is terrible. Whereas Arsenal were the complete opposite. Obviously their set piece coach gets rave reviews every other week. I don't see any other teams' coaches getting singled out for praise when they score from a corner. But hey ho, here we are. This is Arsenal Twitter we're talking about, so it's full of utter lunatics at the best of times. But I will kind of forewarn Arsenal fans: you are going to see a lot of time wasting. And let's not have the hypocrisy
From a Russell Martin team?
I think so, yeah. I mean, let's not have the hypocrisy that that follows obviously that City away game where Arsenal were perfectly valid to play the way that they did in that second half because
Brighton as well, Steve.
Yep, the game circumstances, absolutely fair enough. And any other team in their position would or should have done the same. But we're going to be doing that for a considerable period of Saturday's game, I would have thought, and that as a result, there should be a kind of acceptance that the gulf in resources between the two teams, not just in terms of performances, but the ability to put these players that are, I mean, you've got at least £100 million player in Declan Rice that you can put out on the team, and our transfer record, I think if all of the clauses get enacted on Aaron Ramsdale's deal, then that'll be 25, and that's that will be our record signing. So just the sheer gulf in resources and what you've got available to you, it does kind of show up the this sort of best league in the world bollocks, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it is what it is, and we go there. I mean, we start the game at 0-0 at least. We'll see how long it lasts, but as ever, you never know. I mean, I think we probably do know, but to begin it, you kind of try and tell yourself that somehow this time will be different, and we'll see. But I think realistically, most Saints fans who are going on Saturday will probably think, well, if we can just get out of this without having our asses completely handed to us on a plate, then that's probably a positive, and we take the non-damage to the goal difference and move on.
Seb, I'm going to ask you for a score prediction in just a moment because we do this every week and we always get it wrong. There were, however, 3 people in our Patreons league that got 3 points this week. So congratulations to Andrew Hatcher, Simon Wright, and Mike Bintz. Mike is now top of our Patreon leaderboard. He's got 10 points. Seb, score prediction for you, please.
Oh, I'm really bad at these.
Be kind. Well, welcome to the club. There's going to be some big numbers here, isn't there?
I'm going to go 3-0 to the Arsenal. I think considering we've been going on like 6 or 7 games in the past 3 weeks, there's bound to be some energy reservation at some point during the game. I'd be surprised if there wasn't at least one set-piece goal in there, but I don't think this will be a tonking, as it were, either way. Either through Southampton actually defending well or through Arsenal taking the foot off the gas. I don't think we're going to see an outrageous scoreline. And if I can say something, I really hope this isn't going to be taken as the end for Russell Martin. I can't help but root for the guy. I think we need managers in the league that are as good of a person as Russell Martin seems to be. I really like the way he presents himself and the way he carries himself. I was taken aback by this sort of tactics seminar he gave last season to the fans. That sort of transparency is really appreciated. And I have a big problem with the cynicism around promoted teams and the way they're supposed to be playing, and this conflation between pragmatism being a proxy word for every promoted team has to sit in their own box and defend and basically do nothing else, and everything that goes beyond that is decried as naivety. We can have discussions on the merits of how good Russell Martin is in coaching the way he coaches. I do think he is good and can adapt and has adapted last season. But dismissing it out of hand is something that tends to happen from the outside for coaches like this. And I can't help but root for people that are as strong-bound in their views as Russell Martin is.
It's interesting to get your opinion on that. And I think, as Steve kind of said there, it does highlight the gulf between the Premier League and the Championship, especially last year with all 3 promoted sides getting relegated. And obviously the bookies predicting the same might happen this time round. We got you down for a 3. Steve, any advance on 3 goals?
I was probably going to go one more aside, so 4-1.
Okay, interesting. Glenn?
Arsenal's defence, they've not kept as many clean sheets as they did sort of per game as they did last season. They've been, I mean, obviously the ones against Leicester were kind of slightly freakish, but yeah, Brighton have scored. Obviously Leicester have scored a couple of times. City scored a couple of times. So it's not been the sort of rock solid defence that they had throughout all of last season so far.
Glenn, do you want to pick a number out the air?
Seb's already taken it. Yeah, Seb's already taken it. What I was going to say, to be honest, I was going to say 3-0, and I will go with 3-0, which, you know, I think we'll be sort of, you know, we'll stick to it, stick with it. But I honestly can't see us scoring. I think Arsenal's defence is too good. I think a midfield which will probably contain 2 of Rice, Partey, and Jorginho. I just think they'll be too much for our midfield as well. And I think it will be a backs to the wall effort for a vast majority of the game. I'd be surprised if we even see David Raya on the highlight reel on Match of the Day, to be honest. So no, I'll go 3-0 to Arsenal.
And Alfie?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go one more, just go 4-0. I mean, Steve, you sort of say that their defence hasn't been as rock solid as it has last season. And, you know, I think that just sort of shows how good they were last year, because they played, 8 games and kept 6 clean sheets, is it? 8 competitive games and kept 6 clean sheets.
We are still at the point where we have conceded 3. Oh, no, it has to be more now, considering the Manchester City game. I think we have 5 goals conceded away from home in 2024.
Yeah, five clean sheets in 8 games, which isn't bad going. So I don't see Southampton scoring, but yeah, I'll go 4-0.
All right. If you're watching live, don't forget to put your score predictions into the comments. Cheers, Seb. Thanks for coming on. Really insightful, and yeah, enjoy the weekend, and we'll probably catch up later in the season if that's all right.
No worries. Would love that.
Well, that's made us all feel nice and positive for the weekend. Couple of things before we finish. One of the big stories this week, Jack Stevens been given another 2-match suspension and fined £50,000. He admitted that he used abusive, insulting words such as... No, I can't.
Can you read out the quote?
The referee and the 4th official. Bit harsh, Alfie. I understand that he requested the personal hearing to just kind of apologise and hope that it might not come to that.
I think what it is when you read the report that Mr. Gavin Ward and Mr. Stuart Atwell have filed, and particularly Gavin Ward's, where Jack Stevens calls him "you little effing cunt," and then he goes, but then he looks, and then the report actually says he then turns, looked me right in the eye again, and said, "You little effing cunt." But in the cold light of day, it's quite brutal. And Steve obviously suggested on Twitter that you've got the plea that it's truth, Your Honour. So it's not a lie. But I'm sure that in football that happens all the time, and I think Southampton probably feel a little bit aggrieved, and I think Jack Stevens feels a little bit aggrieved because, like you say, he called that personal hearing. It was a comprehensive apology. He mentioned the fact that he's a Saints Foundation ambassador. He coaches under 16s team. He's extremely sincerely sorry. It was in the heat of the moment sort of incident. And now they lose him for 2 more games. The FA originally wanted to give him a 4-game ban, 2 for each incident of abusive language, but I think they've mitigated it down. And I think one of the arguments was if he got sent off for that language, it would have just been a 2-game ban, so they gave him that. So yeah, they miss him for 2 games. It's quite funny when you actually read the quotes and stuff, but it's not what you want from your captain, let's be totally honest. But at the same time, it probably happens in a lot more games, and it doesn't go punished. So I think they'll be keeping a keen eye on the likes of Morgan Gibbs-White to see what happens there.
It is funny, Glenn, but at the same time, I just can't help but think, you're the captain, you've got to set a better example than that. I did see the fundraiser. Somebody was saying we should start a crowdfunder to play it for him, because if we all agree, but
no.
That to one side, it's not great, is it, when your captain's using language like that?
No, and the whole incident showed a frazzled mind, to be honest, because it was a clear red card, and we'd lost the game already, so it was utterly pointless. It's actually one of my pet hates, and VAR has made it more difficult. But it's always been one of my pet hates when players get a red card and they don't get off the pitch. Just go. Now they hang around to see if VAR is going to somehow save them, and it's the same when a penalty gets given. Get out of the penalty area. We had it the other week with Bruno Fernandes. He's in the ear of the referee. Get out of the penalty area. There's no reason for you to be in there. So I don't have much sympathy for Jack Stevens for what he did, and I think a 1 game ban per incident, if you like, is fair enough. But it's got to be applied across the rest of the Premier League now, because I mean, you think back a few years, Wayne Rooney would never have played a game. Every game he was caught on camera, saying that to every official that he got anywhere near. I remember one a couple of years ago. We had Ashley Barnes when we played Burnley, who basically screamed in the linesman's face, and everyone could tell what he was saying there. They've got to apply it across the game. So, like you say, the Morgan Gibbs White one. I mean, and that was quite a harsh red card. It was at least a sort of 50-50 one. I've only seen the challenge once, mind. It might have been worse from repeated view, but. Yeah, I mean, he's just got to take it on the chin, and the club can get annoyed about it if they don't apply the same, the same punishment across the rest of the games. It'd be interesting to see what happens when it's when it's a big player from a big club, whether and then we'll see whether Stevens has just been made an example of because they can, sort of thing.
We probably need someone with his attitude coming in to the side, though. That's the irony, Steve. A lot of people say, well, actually, we might go on a bit of an unbeaten run and we might be better without him. But when the chips are down, Russell Martin says that he's the one that he needs in the side.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've kind of feel this. We've done this particular one to death, haven't we, over the last year or so? I personally disagree. I think we are marginally, but we are a better defence without him in the team. I think the two that we have in there at the moment, Harwood-Bellis and Bednarek, are the best partnership, and having 3 in there basically just nullifies any sort of attacking sense that we have. So no, I'm sorry. We're like him being suspended isn't why we lost to Bournemouth, for example. Him playing in that game would have made negligible, if any, difference. But what I will say on the actual offence is, I mean, I think the last player to have been charged for the same thing was Virgil van Dijk, after he was sent off away at Liverpool, away at Newcastle, I believe, which I think was the start of last season. So, I mean, you cannot possibly tell me
that no one said that in a year.
Has not been a single player in any level of professional football in the top 5 divisions of football in this country who has not called a referee that. And basically, there is absolutely no way that if Jack Stevens had said that to Stuart Atwell in the Man United game before he'd been sent off, that Atwell would have said, "Oh, that's offensive, insulting, and abusive language. There's your red card."
Yeah,
absolutely no chance. Not in a month of Sundays, and it's basically he's used the fact that he's already sent him off, so it doesn't matter. He's being suspended 3 games anyway. So we'll just lump this extra misconduct charge in on top as a double whammy, just because I can. It's ridiculous. I mean, as Glen said, I mean he deserves the punishment, but only if it's going to be applied equally. Is a referee going to, if a referee, whether that's Atwell or any of the others, if they get called that name by a player in the heat of the action at some point this weekend, are they going to say, well, there's precedent? You knew what punishment Jack Stevens got, so sorry, here's your card, and off you go. I will take all of your money.
I can't help but feel that the bit that's done him is saying it to Gavin Ward, taking a couple of steps away, turning around, looking me in the eye, and then saying it again. I think that's probably the bit where it's pushed over the line. Brilliant.
It's going to get like TV and radio. There'll be different levels of swear words and different sanctions for different things. There is a positive to finish on. The women's team won 2-0 at home to Sheffield United last weekend. I was there for this one, actually. Freya Gregory scoring her first goal for the club. Goalless at half-time, but the
goal
changes. Yeah, really good goal. Second half changes seem to kind of make the difference there. Saints currently 4th in the table, 5 points off of the leaders, Charlton. And, of course, they'll be hoping to build on that when they take on London City Lionesses, which is at Eastleigh tomorrow night. I hope the therapy session helped, this midweek session that we put on. You can follow Total Saints Podcast on all the social media platforms. It's at Total Saints Pod. And you can check out the merch store as well, which is shop.totalsaints.co.uk. You'll also find us on Patreon. That's where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Just visit patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. And each of the tiers comes with different perks, including some shout outs for the patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tiers. So thank you to Dave Melton, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nikki Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, and James Kibbe. They're all in our Francis Benali tier. And also thank you to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrup, Matt Hall, Mark Littlewood, Mike Etheridge, James Bobin, and now John Bevan as well in our Mick Shannon tier. Thanks as always to Paul Castle Associates and Steamtown Brewery for sponsoring TSP this season. Thank you, Steve, Glen, and Alfie. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you again for our next pod, which is going to be on Sunday the 20th of October, and that'll be at 7 o'clock.